Welcome back. I'm Alfred Webre, and we're very privileged today to have with us the daughter, the putative reported daughter of King Edward VIII of England, Emily Windsor Cragg. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Alfred. I enjoy so much your invitations and the opportunity to investigate and probe because you're so good at it.
Oh, well, I'm very glad to be here. And you can say that I've been on this case since I was 16 years old when I used to drive around in your father's Thunderbird in rural Cuba. So,
well, you've been on it longer than I have because
yeah.
I didn't find out about any of this till I was nearly 40, and I didn't start pursuing it until I was much older than that. So, hey, you've been on this case a long time. So
A long time.
You really lead me, yeah.
Of course, I wasn't conscious of it then. It was just something that came into my life at that time, but it sort of sparked, at this stage, it sparked an ongoing interest, but I have to admit that the British monarchy is sort of the linchpin of the monarchical question. It's a linchpin of the Anunnaki legacy on our planet, because if you trace it back, all monarchies are a legacy of the Anunnaki.
Exactly. And there's some differences between the Jacobean monarchy in Britain versus the Merovingian monarchies in Northern Europe, the Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Netherlands, and so on. There are some real differences because the people in Britain have suffered and have experienced a deterioration in their civil and cultural life that the other monarchies haven't had, which is a huge difference to see. Right. Also, the British monarchy is more into acquisitiveness and power and riches than the other monarchies are. So that's one of the things I want to notice, is that there are monarchies and there are monarchies, and they're not all the same.
Very good observation. Now, the specific sort of trigger for our interview and our kind of conversation and coming together today resulted from all of the publicity flap from the release of the famous photographs, childhood photographs of Elizabeth Windsor supposedly giving the Nazi salute as a child. And I think it was it Edward that was taking the...
No, he wasn't taking the pictures. Her father was taking the pictures.
Oh,
but did you see the picture of her mother standing next to her? Her mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyons, is giving that Nazi salute with vim and vigor and conviction. And that's what I would have thought people would have noticed. I mean, just because a little kid is following along, you know, it could be a game. But look at what her mother's doing. Wow.
Right. But all of a sudden, the centerpiece of the whole news release seemed to be Edward VIII. It wasn't really Queen, wasn't it?
Exactly.
It was though a smear on your father, on Edward VIII, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, and then the media do that all the time, and they twist the story to make it look as if Edward has done something wrong when he's going along with something 1933, which is 6 years before World War II starts. 1938, Hitler was Times Man of the Year. Okay, so in 1937, when Edward and Wallace went to Germany on their honeymoon, okay, and I understand from my father's autobiography, he said, I went to Germany to reason with the man. He went there to find out what was going on in his own abdication, because he was no longer allowed into England. If he called into the switchboard at Buckingham Palace, he was told that they wouldn't forward his calls anymore. He couldn't even talk to his family on the phone anymore. He didn't know what was going on. So he went to Germany to find out what was going on, and he took Wallace. And in the pictures of his being received by Hitler, if you look at the expressions on the faces, Wallace is already Hitler's friend, and Edward's standing in the back saying, what's going on? You can see the puzzled look on his face, like, what is this?
So this is, he went to England to Germany in 1937?
Yeah, 1937. The year before Hitler was Times Man of the Year. So Hitler was not an ogre in those days.
I see. Right. And we'll backtrack on this, and we'll go through the whole story of the relationship between Hitler and your father and George VI, and how they were half brothers and everything. What I want to do is to backtrack all of this story and show how this flap may have been connected to what's been happening to you over the last several months. And your adventures.
That never occurred to me.
Oh, well, it may or may not be connected, but we're going to explore that.
Oh,
now let's start. Let's bring everybody into the picture here, and start with your claim.
Yeah.
And that is that you write a book, and I think it was written in 2014. Is that correct?
Yes, in October.
October, and that's available on Amazon. It's
Saints or Sons of Perdition.
Yeah, and could you tell the viewers something about that book? Okay,
it's not a huge book. It's 130 pages or so. It's in color, and I included all the photographs I could find to back up what I was saying. I wasn't just talking off the top of my head. And basically, for 15 years, I saved photographs, and then after a while, I had to put the photographs together. So I began looking for the connections between the text and the photographs, and that's how I finally put it together. So, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So when I made the claim, I had just threaded the whole story together for myself for the first time. So I was excited. I was really excited. And what became apparent to me was how far off the official version is. It's about as accurate as the 9/11 official version or the JFK official version. I mean, it's way off what actually was going on in the royal family. And that's when I published the claim that if this family can't tell the truth and can't follow the coronation vows, they have to be replaced. And I still insist on that.
Well, let me kind of back up even more.
Okay.
And that is that because our news agency interviewed you and published your story, we get a lot of mail from people all over the world that we forward to you.
Okay.
And this past week, you answered somebody who was asking about your mother. So you answered them. My mother was an Army nurse at Fort Huachuca, Arizona at the time when it was a spook base. the Duke, your father,
Right.
King Edward VIII, wanted to see the saucer craft being engineered by the U.S. Army that Uncle Kaiser Wilhelm of
Uncle
Germany,
Willie. Yeah.
Uncle Willie, had talked about. So could you, from this point of view, bringing in the flying saucer angle, kind of walk us through all of the exotic aspects about how your father and mother met over a weekend at a secret flying saucer base? Because that kind of brings in your aspect of being very interested in extraterrestrials. I mean, you know, give us the full treatment.
Well, basically, my research into UFOs, and I've been saving pictures of UFOs for 20 years. And so I well knew about Operation Paperclip. I knew that the Germans had access to saucer craft, and I have pictures from 1928 of saucer craft when Kaiser Wilhelm was at the apex of his power. I knew that my father was close with Kaiser Wilhelm. They talked all the time. They were buddies. And that my father spoke fluent German, and he's part of this German family. And so my dad was, you know, on the ground in World War I, in France, the Western Italian Front, in Morocco. He was on the ground 3.5 years and survived in World War I, which was quite an accomplishment. Most of his contemporaries didn't come back, but he came back. But in that period of time, while he was on the ground, he made friends with the American military. So he knew the generals and the commanders and stuff, and he was very friendly with them. If you see his pictures, all of his military pictures, he's always glad handing the military. He just thinks they're wonderful. Okay, so at a certain point, when I found out where my father and the Duchess were staying for the spring of 1943, and I found it out in a Discovery Channel TV program, that they spent that spring of 1943 at the Alawani Hotel at Yosemite. And I looked at a map, and that's only 600 miles from Fort Huachuca. And my dad had all these friends in the military, and Uncle Willie knew all about Fort Huachuca's saucer craft back engineering program. Bingo! It became perfectly obvious because I was conceived over Memorial Day weekend. And what happens on Memorial Day weekend? A celebrity comes in and reviews the troops. Perfect. That's when it all came together for me over UFOs, saucer craft, and pictures of strange things like that. So that's how I put that whole piece together. Yeah, my mother was a nurse there, and both of them were serious drinkers, and my mother considered him to be a little wimp. She was not impressed. Okay, so she didn't tell me much about it for a long, long time, okay, because I think she was kind of ashamed.
I see.
Yeah.
He was quite short, correct?
5'7".
5'7". Yeah.
And
which is short for a man.
Yeah, my mother was 5'10".
Oh, so she was much taller than.
Yes, and my half brothers are all over 6'4", 6'3", 6'4". We're all very big. My kids are all very big.
Yeah.
So I think because the other brothers of my father's siblings are all of a normal height. They're all right around 6 feet. If you notice, George VI, you notice Charles, you notice Andrew. They're all of a normal height. My dad was extraordinarily tiny. And I think what happened to him, he literally failed to thrive, because in pictures of him taken in 1909, 1910, 1911, he came up to his mother's shoulder. He was only about 5'1", 5'2", when he was 16, 17 years old. he failed to thrive under the domination and the pressure of his royal family at the time, with the death of Edward VII and the investiture as the Prince of Wales, where he had to dress up in this frilly dress that would have done Cinderella proud. I mean, it was what he had to dress for the investiture was just horrible. You wonder why he got into cross-dressing later. And so he was the only little itty bitty short one. All the others in the family are normal height. So that's why I was 5'10" when I was at my tallest. I'm 5'9" now, but all my kids are big.
But your basic premise is that he, from your research, he was the only sort of non-satanic soul that incarnated into that family, that all of the others were drawn into.
I only know about Bertie. I do not know about George and the younger brothers. I really don't know about the Duke of Gloucester,
Yeah.
or the Duke of the Duke of Kent, or what. I don't know them, and it's not important to me. But what was important was that my father was at loggerheads with George from the time he was born.
This is his father, George.
Yeah, his father, George. They took opposing. You know how one kid in the family will just take an opposing view from a very small age? I did that at age 5. I became a Christian, drove my adopted family crazy. Okay, so George V was a Luciferian who pretended to be Christian. He belonged to all of the Masonic and secret orders. He was following the Luciferian prophecy of 3 world wars, okay? And Edward stepped back and looked at what his father had done to his own older brother, Albert Victor. He had removed his older brother from the hereditary line. He was hiding at Maze Castle, where Elizabeth Bowes Lyons came from. Then George V got rid of his own son John by shuttling him off to a farm somewhere where he had a epileptic fit and died. George V got rid of cousin Tsar Nicholas. Nikki and they looked like twins. They spent their whole childhood together, but Tsar Nicholas repudiated and refused to allow the Rothschilds banks into Russia. And so George was required and ordered and directed to get rid of him. So that's what happened, is that George V refused sanctuary for Tsar Nicholas. Okay, so then my dad, watching all this in his own, and he was a very, very intelligent man, said to himself, this guy's scary. And he started backing away from his father from the time I have in pictures when George V was staring out into space in these family portraits, and Edward was just very, very small, but his dad must have been on cocaine or something. And so they never saw eye to eye on what the job of king was supposed to be. Edward became a populist, a liberal. He was pro-labor. And George V, having to fulfill Alfred Pike's prophecies about 3 world wars, wasn't having it at all. So that's why they were at loggerheads all the way through. And George V had to find a way to get rid of him, and he did.
Right. And so in 2014 October, is it, you published this book?
Right.
And then there came a time where you put forth a claim to the UK throne crown and throne and an indictment of your niece, I guess it is it?
No, she's my first cousin.
First cousin,
She's
rather.
my first cousin.
Yeah.
And I planned to travel to the UK, all right?
Yeah.
And so I made all those plans to go to the Crown Court, which has jurisdiction, and file the indictment.
Yeah. Now, you published this claim, and it's online, and people can find it online at where?
Let's see. holyconservancy.org/1 and then capital CLAIM 1claim.html, and it's still there.
Yeah, and we also have it at exopolitics.com in a special link, so we will put that in with the article accompanying this interview. Now, approximately when did you publish that claim?
Wow. I think that was the November-December time frame, Alfred.
Okay.
I'm not certain, but that's about right, because by February, I was planning the trip to the UK, and I had met a forum that was very friendly, and they were offering to donate money to help me with the trip.
Right. Now, you were then from the U.S., you were in contact, I believe, with the Office of the Privy Council I
was in contact with the Crown Court.
The Crown Court?
Yes, and they explained to me how they had jurisdiction, so I knew where I had to go. I also realized that it was the Crown Court that was going to have to order the DNA test, otherwise they could just refuse to accept it as evidence. And so
this is a test of your DNA with the DNA of Edward.
That's right, and I can have it done by any test lab in the world, but the Crown Court doesn't have to accept it as evidence unless they order it. Yeah. So that was my primary reason to go to the UK right off, is to just look around and get comfortable and order the test.
Yeah, and so you were getting ready for that, and as I recall, it was at about that time that the first inclinations of Jade Helm, the Operation Jade Helm, were announced. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that said to me, well, this is a good time to go. Okay. Yeah. I was getting donations from the group and had a ticket that my daughter got for me to go to the UK. And then things started falling apart. Yeah.
Now, which group was this?
It's called Able Danger.
Able Danger.
Able Danger. It's run by Field McConnell.
Okay.
And a lot of people there have been very generous to me.
Okay.
And I have sent Mr. McConnell 4 or 5 emails that he never replied to.
Okay.
And I thought that was odd. And then I noticed that my contacts began disappearing.
Oh.
And then the people who made donations didn't want to talk to me anymore.
Oh, well.
You know how the quicksand just kind of
disappeared from under you. Now, what was this? Because I know at some point you wrote to me and you said, Alfred, overnight, because you had secured the information that you had to go to the Crown Court, you also had secured, I believe, lodgings at a farm in Surrey for £50 a week where you could stay, in Surrey, UK, where you could stay while you were carrying out the DNA test, etc., at the Crown Court.
And what happened to him, the black helicopters started flying over his farm again.
Okay, now, did these black helicopters happen after you got involved with Able Danger?
Yes.
It was right after you got involved with Able Danger.
Yeah.
And then one day the farm just kind of fell through. Was that it?
The farm fell through, and the contact in Sweden fell through.
And what was the contact in Sweden about?
Well, he was going to offer me a place to stay at his place, and in Sweden indefinitely.
I see.
All right. And it was in what was the name of that town? It was a mining town in the middle of Sweden.
I see.
And all of a sudden he started talking about, was I interested in S&M? I just came to S&M.
S&M is, what does S&M
Sexual torture. Sexual torture.
Sexual torture?
Was I interested in it? And I said, no, Fred. No. No.
Sadomasochism.
Yeah,
sadomasochism.
Okay. And so I never found out if he was serious or if he was just using that as an excuse to get rid of me, but he got rid of me real quick that way.
It sounds like a cointelpro type of thing, where you end up online and says, oh, you can stay here forever, and then all of it says, oh, by the way, this is all about sadomasochism. It's like,
I never found out anymore.
Bait and switch. Okay, but we don't know if that's.
We don't know about that.
Yeah, but all of a sudden, your infrastructure to be able to stay for £50 a week, which is affordable, and you're a retired school teacher, and Xerox employee, and so then that would have allowed you to pursue the DNA test through the Crown Court, which would have been the first step into pursuing the claim. And we reviewed the claim as an international lawyer, and there's merit to it in our judgment. There is probable cause. I mean,
it's direct relationship, cause and effect. And that was also the time when I had applied for a new passport.
Yeah.
Because I had to renew it. And when it arrived on May 1st.
Okay.
And I was supposed to leave May 4th by then I had to return the ticket to the UK, and I had a ticket to Iceland on the way to the UK.
Yeah.
I couldn't make it in time because the passport didn't come in time. I had to change the ticket to Iceland, and that's when things got really weird, because at the Able Danger group, they gave me the names of a couple people at the embassy and at their immigration department, and I knew I have a legal United States passport and I'm entitled to stay there for 90 days in any case.
Are you talking about Iceland?
Yeah, Iceland.
So you were in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had given up going to the UK directly. I was going to take a side trip through Iceland.
Yeah.
And Iceland immigration started giving me an argument. I knew I was perfectly legal. And they started giving me an argument that if I came there with a one-way ticket, because instead of coming back to the U.S., I planned to go on to the UK, they weren't going to let me in. They were going to turn me away at customs. And I said, what are you talking about? Yeah, what are you talking about?
Iceland, I mean, I can recall I've used Icelandic Airlines. In fact, I remember buying a ticket on Icelandic Airlines to Paris, and you stop in Iceland and then you go on to Paris. What's the big deal?
If I didn't have a ticket somewhere else or a return ticket, they were going to turn me away at customs when I got to Iceland. So I called Iceland.
Because you had Iceland as your final destination.
Yeah.
Oh, I can see that. I mean, most countries, unless you're a permanent resident there or a citizen, you must arrive with either the means or with a ticket out of the country. I mean, there's nothing unusual about that. Now, so continue.
Okay, so I've never been overseas before, so I don't know anything. Okay. And so when they told me that I have a ticket to Iceland, we're going to turn you away, I called the airline back and I said, how can I can't use this ticket because they're going to turn me away, and Icelandic Air gave me my money back. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So then I had a place to stay. Let's see, Sweden had backed out. The UK had backed out, but I had a place to stay in Norway.
Oh.
Because, and in fact, the people in Norway are staying toe to toe with me in my objection and protest to the Norwegian government.
You mean shoulder to shoulder?
Shoulder to shoulder, toe to toe. They're staying shoulder to shoulder with me in my protest to the Norwegian government,
Right.
and they are validating what I said was true. So we're still negotiating that.
Okay, now, before we even get to shoulder, what happened, more or less about around what date, what happened?
It was something else. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I was stuck with the passport that has the horrible picture of me that looks like a Halloween mask. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, now, you know, you can't smile. And
oh, no. You don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The more you look like a robot,
this
the better.
takes that to a whole new level. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. I'm going to have to take this off for a second. You have never seen a passport picture like this.
Okay. Okay. Well,
red skin, blue hair, and a beard.
And those eyes look very strange.
Yes, okay. And so I have objected 3 times to the State Department. I've resent the application, and the State Department says there's nothing wrong with this picture. We're not going to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, right. Never mind what they're doing to people. What they're doing.
But that's not what the picture looked like that they received. The picture that they received was more like this. Whoops, let's see if I can get this.
Okay. Okay, so that does not look like the picture they received.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so when I got stuck with this passport with this hideous picture, I called Norway's immigration department. I said, you know I have a legal passport and I can stay there 90 days, but you know, the State Department has given me a really strange looking picture. And they said, don't worry about a thing. You'll be fine. Don't worry about a thing. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
And so, because I had a home of a minor diplomat to stay as a guest, I went on to Norway.
Yeah.
Whew.
So you were staying at the home of a minor diplomat.
I never got there.
You never even got to the home
I
of a
never even got there.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. I arrived at Oslo Airport, and I had to go through customs, and they pulled me aside, put me in a van, and drove me downtown. I had a motel right there at the airport. I'd already paid for, but they took me downtown, took me to their office, interrogated me for a couple of hours. So then, with all my baggage, I had to find a hotel. I found one. And I put my baggage in.
What was the nature of the interrogation? Why did they pull you aside?
I never found out. I never found out if it was the coding on the passport picture, or if the story that I was telling them, I'm coming to stay for, around 90 days to figure out if I want to stay here or not. I have money to survive.
But did they know who you were staying with?
Yes, and they said that they called him and there was no answer. But when I finally got back to Eric, um, after the whole ordeal was over, what they told him when he showed up looking for me at the airport, they told him, and they completely fabricated this,
Yeah.
that I had flown on to the UK.
So this is a false flag operation that they carried out on you and Eric.
Yes.
In other
Yes.
words, they at Oslo Airport, they set up a false flag operation.
And they got me out of there, and they told him that I'd gone somewhere else.
And that's on a minor diplomat who's a protected individual under international law, so that the Norwegian government committed an infraction. I mean, they violated your human rights and your international rights.
Yeah.
By the false flag operation, but they also went up a higher level and they violated, I'm just talking from an international law point of view, I'm not talking human rights. We haven't even gotten there. And so they just did a false flag on the diplomat because they did not want you getting sanctuary in that diplomat's house. Okay? That was the main thing. Now, if you can recall, let's go to the scene. You're in the police station downtown, is it? When
we started trying to call him from the airport phone.
Yeah.
And they called several times, and I was in the airport detention for several hours. Then they took me downtown, and I don't know if they were continuing to try to call Eric or not.
Yeah.
That's when they got into some serious interrogation.
Okay.
And that's when I brought up, am I some kind of person who needs political asylum because of what is happening to me here? Doesn't make any sense to me. Do I need to ask for political asylum? So I spent the next 3 days in the political asylum process until I found out from a party who knew something that if you ask for political asylum, you are renouncing your citizenship wherever you are. And I said, oh my God, I can't do that. I'll lose my Social Security. So I quit that process.
Oh, okay. So this suddenly took a turn that I wasn't anticipating. We're trying to find out why they went from a false flag that they were committing on you and on Eric, the diplomat, to keep you apart. They were putting you in an artificial environment and saying, we can't reach the diplomat, which is false. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, why would they do that? Why would they be targeting you? Answer, I'll provide an answer. Because you have an active claim as the daughter of
orders from upstairs.
King Edward VIII. You have a valid claim as the daughter of King Edward VIII. And the British monarchy and MI5 said, don't let that woman come here. We have an illegitimate monarch on the throne here, and we don't want our house of cards coming down. How's that?
All they had to do, all Queen Elizabeth had to do was get on the phone to King Harold in Norway and say, keep her out.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay.
That's what they have the authority to do.
By Occam's razor, isn't that the most simple explanation of why the Norwegian police took the chance of doing a false flag with you and the minor diplomat?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you were excluded from Norway by the British Crown to defeat your claim for the British Crown.
absolutely right. And apparently now I'm finding out that of the other monarchies, the Norwegians are more like the British than any of the others. And so they're more inclined to follow Elizabeth than perhaps Queen Margarita of Denmark or Queen Sylvia of Sweden. The royal families are a lot more amenable to outside pressures that aren't as rich as Elizabeth. So the Norwegians have an establishment that they're real buddy-buddy. I didn't know. I don't know anything. I've never done this before.
Well, you know, at our news agency, we've done a couple of interviews with experts, one of them, Loren Murray, and there's a heart facility at Tromsø, Norway. And that heart facility, we've pinpointed it, number one, it was used for the Norway Spiral the night before Barack Obama's Nobel Prize speech in November 2009, the only president who got a Nobel Peace Prize when he hadn't done anything, and every other word in his acceptance speech was war, number one. And the Nobel Committee has to do, that's another Alfred Nobel, you know, it's a misuse of the word Alfred as far as I'm concerned. Alfred is about elfin, you know, advisors to elfin wise counselors, all about peace, the name Alfred. So, and secondly, Loren Murray has shown through triangulation that the Tromsø, Norway heart facility, which is controlled and financed through the Sweden, through a certain family, the Wallenberg Foundation, was used in the Fukushima nuclear radiation false flag.
Norway was a poor choice on my part.
Well, it was, no, I mean, it is a poor choice, but at the same time, you went in there to expose them. See, we never know what the outcome of our actions is.
That's true.
So perhaps your mission was to expose them.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Yeah. So now, please continue with your expose, and let me ask you this. So you're in the interrogation room, and now I'm trying to figure out, because you kind of threw them a curveball by asking for asylum. You know, that kind of asylum. Now we got to put her away for 3 days. But what sorts of questions were they asking you during the initial interrogation?
Well, you know, I have been a targeted individual since I pissed off the Clintons in the late 90s. Oh. And so I have experienced vandalism, gang stalking, electronic microwave bursts in the middle of the night. I've been on the list, the no housing list, the no work list, the no treat list, ever since the late 90s. And so that's basically what I was telling them, and what we were talking about is that being a targeted individual with Jade Helm on the horizon,
right.
I just need to get away. I need to get away for a while and see how that works out, and write another book and feel safe, because I don't feel safe the way things are. And I think that was a very legitimate thing for me to say, because there's so much rumor and stuff going on about whether Jade Helm is real or not, or this or that, or training or whatever, extraction of dissidents to detention centers. So I was just being frank with them and candid and saying, well, here is the situation. Since about 1998, I've been targeted. And now they're going to add this Jade Helm thing. And so, do I need to be a political, have a political asylum to
I
stay
see.
here until that goes away?
I see. I see. Okay. Okay. And so after 3 days, what occurred?
They told me they lost my passport.
Oh,
On the third day, they lost my passport. Can't find your passport. Can't
oh,
find.
so
And every
so
day I
so
had to
finally
come on.
you put them in enough of a corner that you escalated the whole thing that they just threw up their hands and manufactured it.
Okay. And so I had been getting on, leaving the hotel and getting on public transportation, which is wonderful, by the way, in Oslo, and getting to the office of Customs Immigration Police, and sitting there for hours and hours and hours on end till they would talk to me, and they would all say exactly the same script. Here's their script. I don't know anything about your case, one. They would let me ask a question. I'd ask the question. They'd say, no, you can't do that. Or they'd say, I don't know. Or they'd say, the rule is. And then they'd tell me something that was absolutely false. They would say, well, I'll hand it over here, or I'll have somebody call you, or this will happen, or that'll happen. Number 4 statement was always false. Okay. So on the 4th day, when I came to pick up my passport, that's all I came for. They said, excuse us, ma'am, we're taking you somewhere. I said, you mean I'm a prisoner? And they said, no, you're not a prisoner. Well, what are we doing here? So they put me in a military van that had bars all the way around the compartment where I was sitting. And they took me back to the airport, 45-minute drive. Around one side of the airport, here was a compound full of 2 or 3 story buildings with razor wire all the way around it. And they brought me in and they strip searched me and took everything I had. And for the next 48 hours, I didn't have a comb or a pen. All I had was the clothes I was wearing. I had no access to a telephone, although they showed me back in Oslo a piece of paper that I had to sign that said I had the right to have an attorney present. But when I was at the detention center and they were reading off their ruling that I had to be sent back to the United States, I said to them, but there's been no attorney present. There's been no case, no judge, no charges, no testimony. On what basis are you asking me to sign a document that has nothing to do with my behavior? No, I'm not going to sign this document. So I wrote on it, I'm not signing a document that has nothing to do with my behavior. It's only about policies and procedures of the state. They didn't like that either. They didn't like that at all.
right. Right. Now, just, not to belabor it, but just to get it absolutely clear, because, I've traveled and you get off the plane and if you're, generally you go into customs and they say, why are you here? If you're generally just traveling a tourist, you say, well, I'm here to see some friends and I'm staying for, a couple of weekend, or you say, I'm here to speak at a conference and I'll be here for a week or something. And that's about it, right? So when you got off the plane and you approached the customs officer, what did you say when he said, why are you here?
Gosh, I don't exactly remember. I remember over the whole time there was so much that I talked about.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what I said the first time.
Okay, but what triggered?
Oh, I'm here to meet my friends. I'm here to meet my friends. Yeah, because I'm staying as a guest.
As a guest.
And here's their address and phone number.
And that's what triggered the false flag. So that you were targeted even before you got off the plane.
I think yes. I was targeted.
Okay. So,
I was targeted by that
double
passport.
check that. So you were excluded even before you got off the plane. Now, what makes you think that you're going to be able to go to the UK and that they're going to let you into the UK to pursue your claim? I'm just asking.
Well, okay, and that's where I'm at. That's exactly where I'm at, because the passport still has this very suspicious coded picture. I've contacted the U.S. representative, Richard Thompson, from my area in California to get him to ask the State Department why they've done this to my passport. I think with this passport, I can't go anywhere in the world.
Well, let me just take a contrarian point of view. None of the officials that you've said so far have said anything about the picture.
I don't think they ever will.
No, but I mean, it's not about the picture. It's about you. See?
That's how my identity is coded for everybody in customs, is that I've been pre-selected as a no-good-nick by the State Department because they know that I have this claim against the Queen of England.
Right, but...
And this passport won't work anywhere any differently as long as that picture is like that, because I'm pre-selected as a dissident that's undesirable. And that's why this has to get fixed.
Okay, now I'm still going to be contrarian on that.
Okay, go for it.
Because from my experience, it's what's in the computer database, not what's on the passport itself, that is what the customs officer's looking at. And that there's, if you've been coded, the code is you're in a computer database which is accessible to the customs officer. So you're coming up in line and they take your passport and they scan it. Yeah. And then there's all this data that comes up.
And I think that the crazy picture reflects the data that's on the computer.
Okay, but so fixing the picture is not going to fix the data, because you have been identified as a threat to the current British monarchy. Yeah. And so when I wrote you and I said the status of your UK claim and possible connection to the recent Nazi salute photo psyops, I think that the way that they embedded this, the way they embedded that code into the public subconscious, is they created this past week
these articles.
They create as part of what I call the air war. Yeah. There's the ground war and there's the air war.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. Yeah.
And the air war has to do with memes that are loaded into people's conscious and subconscious.
And they keep telling the same stories over and over, the same official dogma that had nothing to do with reality. It's just the official story. And so they're bringing up the memes again.
Yeah. And so in the ground war, what they did is they shot your horse out from under you in England. Yeah. Okay? And it's still uncertain. We've got to follow through with Able Danger to find out, are they futzing around with you behind the scenes and assisting in that or not? Or were they genuinely helping you? Okay, that's an open research question.
That's an open research question.
Number two.
But my horse is shot out from under me.
Yeah. Number two, then, with regard to Iceland and Norway, then, Iceland's an open question because Yeah, you know, you have to have, if you're transiting through Iceland, you've got to have a ticket out of Iceland in order to enter Iceland, and that's always been that way. So,
Okay, and that's what I didn't know.
yeah, yeah. Now, with regard to Norway, it's clear, if we take that as ground war, that, hey, they had the ground war set up for you there. And you're in the computer, and they said, oh, this is going to be a special ground war because she's connected to a diplomat. If she gets in that house, she has diplomatic immunity. It's going to be hard to keep her out. So we have to intercept her at the airport so she doesn't even connect with her diplomat and get diplomatic immunity.
That's what I didn't know.
Yeah. No, you have to outthink these people at multiple levels in the ground war. And then, so now we come back, and from their controller point of view, they said, okay, we defeated her in the ground war in round 3, but we have to set it up in the air war now, so that if she comes back to England and she tries to put her thing in there, she does some interviews and do headlines, people are going to say, oh man, Edward VIII, he's some friggin' Nazi. Don't even bother with him. So what they do is they create some air war incidents
to make it look like.
To create a lot of confusion in the mind, to make that, oh, Edward VIII, he was the Nazi of the Nazi salute. Oh, forget about it. Don't even go there. You see?
They rehearsed the
Yeah. And so that's why.
They rehearsed the right.
That's
why they did
the recent Nazi salute photo psyop. I would argue, you know, I'm not saying this is gospel truth what happened, but
it makes perfect sense.
As a person who has 40 years experience of public interest counterintelligence, because that's what I've done with my life since 1973. You know, other people become chemical engineers and work for Dow Chemical and make napalm. That's what people in my generation did, and I didn't do that. I went into public interest counterintelligence, okay? And I'm proud of the life decisions that I made. I'm from the Vietnam generation, right?
Yeah, and we both are.
Yeah, and so my judgment as public interest counterintelligence is that recent psyop of the recent Nazi salute photo psyop involving your father and the current occupant of the British crown and throne, Elizabeth Windsor, is all about the air war component to defeat your claim. And it's the second component of deporting you from Norway with a very sophisticated false flag against the diplomat, so you could not meet up with him, whereby you would have achieved diplomatic immunity at his house.
Wow.
Kind of like the fellow who's holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in
Assange.
London.
Julian Assange.
You would have been the Julian Assange of Norway.
That was the whole, that's exactly what I was trying to do.
And that is what they were trying to avoid, having you be the Julian Assange of Norway, where we would have been interviewing you from the house of X, Y, and Z diplomat, that they could not assault that house with their usual New World Order tricks. Yeah. So that's my analysis. Let me ask you how you feel about the integrity and validity of the analysis that I just asked you about.
Well, it's right on, but what it brings up for me is the next step and the next step and the next step in this ground war and air war. Now, what I did in the air war, in each case, for each magazine article, I responded with the clarification as to the data, and with a link to my book that tells the real story in both of those cases. It was 2 or 3. And now I'm in the process of writing a letter, a formal letter, to King Harald of Norway to lay out what happened to me and to have him help me come to a firm judgment about what's going on here before I can proceed with any further plans for my life whatsoever, because I realize they shot my horse out from under me, and it's not clear. I have a horse. It's not clear at this point that I even have a horse.
It's not clear that I have a horse. What do you mean by that metaphor?
Is that I don't have an option to pursue, because anywhere I go, I'm going to have exactly the same outcome based on the computer records, whether that is reflected in the passport or not. Somebody is waiting for me, and they're waiting for me to try something.
Yeah. Now, here is how you can get around that, which I remember that you wrote a group letter to a number of people. It included the able danger people and included me, and I responded to you and to the group.
They didn't.
Yeah, they didn't. And they were in charge of your security, okay? And I was just a friend of the court. I just said, look, this is how you do it. And what you do is that you take your American passport and you go to the nearest consulate, probably San Francisco. If it's Norway, you go to the Norwegian consulate in San Francisco. If it's Britain, you go to the UK consulate in San Francisco. That's the nearest consulate. And you walk in and you say, I want a stamped visa to your country. Stamped. Okay? And usually you have to leave your visa there for a couple of days or a week. And they're on the hook then. As soon as the consul puts a stamp on there and signs it, that's it. So that they can't hold you at the airport, because the consul is the guy who's doing all of the advance work.
Okay. All right. That gives me a way to go.
Yeah.
That gives me a way to go.
If you're going directly to the UK, my sincere advice is do not go through able danger. And I'm not making any accusations because I haven't done any investigations.
Yeah, but I don't, because after I went there, everything kind of, a lot of the options just kind of dissolved. I'm not going back there anyway because whatever happened, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
It didn't work out.
It didn't work out. But if you're going to the UK, go to the UK consulate in San Francisco, say. I assume that there's, wherever the nearest UK consulate is.
Well, it's going to be, San Francisco is about 120 miles.
Yeah. Call them up, make an appointment, say, I've got, and insist. If they say, oh, you don't need it, insist. Say, no, I want my signed tourist visa.
Okay.
And insist on it, and then you go in and it's signed and it's stamped, and that's it.
What if they say no?
Well, then say, look, what's happened to me, this is what happened to me in Norway. And Norway is a member of the EU, I believe, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. This is what happened to me in EU, and Alfred Webre, who's a member of the District of Columbia Bar and who's an international judge, advised me to do this.
Well, that makes perfect sense, yeah.
Yeah, because I cannot undergo these risks anymore because of the actions that were taken to keep me from my hosts who were diplomats in Oslo.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have perfect rights. At least if they're going to withhold it in Britain, well, all you've lost is a trip to San Francisco. You're still in your home territory. They aren't, putting you in an immigration prison.
That is, unless Jade Helm is a problem in and of itself.
Well, that still remains to be seen, okay? We're still in the early stages of Jade Helm. Today is the 7th day of today's July 22nd, so it's the 8th day of Jade Helm. And from what I understand, Jade Helm is already underway with due intensity in the Bay Area. So, go to a non-Jade Helm state. Go to the UK consulate in Seattle. I mean, I'm just kind of offering.
But at our age, we don't have options the way we did when we were younger, and they're harder to exercise because our finances are very finite.
Sure. But now you can, and now, so if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Yeah.
And Thomas Edison, it's 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration.
Yeah.
So you just keep on trying, right? Because
that's right.
You're trying the false flag at the airport? No, you can't do that one again. You've already tried that one.
Okay. We'll try another approach.
And
right.
And then you go forward because we already know that they're putting psyops in the air in the newspapers and taking up. See, all this occupies global psychic energy. These air war hits, like around the Nazi salute, it occupies global psychic energy for 48 hours. And that's what they want. Because
it's a distraction. Right.
Yeah. But you're going forward with your claim, and that's what they're afraid of, because they don't want it known that the Archbishop of Canterbury conspired with the former queen, to push your father off the throne.
Yeah, I know that.
And so therefore, the new king was illegitimate.
Exactly true. And of course, he carried out the same Luciferian prophecy to stage those 3 world wars. He worked on World War II, and now they're working on staging World War III. And that's what we really need to halt. We need to bring staging World War III to a halt, which is what the Luciferians are still trying to do.
So, in a way, and this is trying to connect, and I know I've been kind of talking a lot more than I do, because I said I'm going to push you in certain directions to see whether you agree with my theories or not, or theories that I want to. I'm not suggesting them in your mind, because I know that you do object when you see something that you don't believe is correct.
No, but they're consistent with reason, and they're consistent with the events. And so it makes sense that what we're seeing is a sequence of operations to keep me at distance, out of Europe, out of their hair, so that this case is difficult to pursue. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Now, as both an attorney, a lawyer, a judge, and as a graduate counseling psychologist, I think that in the same way that your father was attempting to prevent World War II as a light worker incarnating soul in that family, when he was forced into a false flag abdication, you have returned and you're incarnating, and your soul is now throwing itself, at Norway, at the UK, through your claim to attempt to prevent World War III.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
right.
Could you expand on that thought?
Well, yeah, because World War III is the outgrowth of the corruption that we see, that is detailed and articulated in Revelation, but that goes back to Genesis, to the 3rd chapter of Genesis, verse 15 that says, because you have done this, I will put you enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. You will bruise him, he will bruise you in the head, you will bruise him in the heel. It was at that point that slavery became the way of humanity, because of whatever that rebellion was that back then. It's been slavery ever since. Slavery under the hierarchies and the monarchies and the fiat banking systems and the corporate maritime law since King Henry VIII's Armada vanquished the Spanish Armada and vanquished the Spain under maritime law. And since then, maritime law, which is impersonal, where there's no trust whatsoever, has overturned plowed common law under the ground. And so maritime law and procuring infants for adoption and body parts from abortions, procuring children away from their loving families by social service agencies, procuring unwanted kids for pedophiles and porn, networks, procuring people as if people are commodities is part and parcel of the political person system, maritime law that says our names are in all capitals and our birth certificate is a bond on Wall Street that gets traded and we're nothing but commodities. This is all slavery. And so what has to happen is slavery has to be overturned at the level of law. At the level of law, persons cannot be regarded as commodities anymore, nor can the planet just be seen as nothing but a resource to be exploited, which is what the same Luciferians who are creating wars and profiting on wars and creating vice in every way to keep the people distracted. We've got our lotteries and our, the whole gamut. Okay, that whole system of slavery has to be brought to an end. And the way it can be brought to an end is to confront the simple limits of common law that were given back to Moses, that were practiced by the Celts in Ireland from 583 BC until 400 AD. They had almost 1,000 years of peace under the Celtic Mosaic Law covenant. Queen Elizabeth doesn't even make the claim that she is part of the Kingdom of David covenant, or that the Stone of Scone has any meaning to her. That's how far she has strayed from her coronation vows, from knowing even what a queen is. And so that's the program of education that I'm here to talk about and get people thinking about, and get people noticing the difference between common law, which is based in trust, versus maritime law, administrative statutes, and corporate statutes and codes that are all based in a non-trust situation. The Norwegians have the non-trust situation down to a science. They have it down to a science. They can take an individual who has no history of aggression or crime or anything and put them through a process in which it looks as if they are attending to that individual. But the process is so twisted that the individual never gets a chance to record their own consent, record their own experience. I was simply talked over the whole time I was in Norway, simply talked over as if I was a piece of meat at the butcher store. And that's what maritime law has done to humanity, is that we're all just pieces of meat at the butcher shop now, under law, because our names are all in capitals and our birth certificates are on Wall Street. And we're traded like cattle, you know, at the stockyards. That is the system that has to come down for a positive timeline to begin to flourish. That
Right.
has to stop.
Right. What specific triggers and steps do you see for the deconstruction of that system?
There are two natural disasters coming. One has to do with humanity's, what goes, you know, the principle, what goes around comes around, and what you sow, you have to reap. And so there is a planet or a planetary or plane. We're getting in an argument these days about whether the Earth is a sphere or a plane, but never mind. Whether, what goes around comes around. Justice, what goes around comes around. Whatever you send out is what you get back. And humanity's behavior, has created a karmic situation that's going to be reflected in the geology of the planet. Either, there's going to be earthquakes. That's what Scripture says. We're going to have earthquakes and tsunamis and problems with weather and yakata smackata. Okay, that's one situation that we believe is coming due September the 23rd.
Oh.
Okay. Or is that okay? We also have, according to the ET treaties, the Greada Treaty, the Tau 9, and the TPP treaties, which all prosper human trafficking in souls, abductions, transhumanism, experimenting on humans. That's a bunch of ET issues. And so there's a what goes around comes around event that's associated with that set of treaties and that set of behaviors. So whether it's going to be an asteroid or whatever it's going to be, but we have two karmic events coming upon us that are going to break things loose. One thing that I heard this morning that really surprised me from Tom Williams, who has insider information about population reduction issues. He says that his sources tell him our planet doesn't have 7 billion people. We're down to 0.9 billion on the planet.
0.9 billion?
3.9 billion. We're just at 4 billion, and the population reduction strategies of chemtrails and contaminated vaccines and contaminated food and contaminated water and diseases added to everything has actually been quite effective. I didn't know that. And I don't know exactly his sources. But I'm looking into that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's almost 45%.
Almost half. Yeah. Yeah. So we have these two karmic events coming at us because of human behavior and because of our human behavior with respect to ET treaties. And those events are going to break things loose so that we can proceed with the real human problem of governance under laws of the land or governance under laws of the sea, and which relationships need to be prosecuted and held to trust relationships, like common law, like condominium documents are all based on trust relationships. Okay, condominiums, they work fine. Or when do we use maritime law and presume that people are guilty unless they're proven innocent? Okay, I guess we sort of have to do that with some ETs, particularly the Greys and the Anunnaki. So we have these issues around law, and what we need is a legal renaissance. We need attorneys like you. You're my JD to go in and clarify. So you've been a judge also. which form of law or administrative code or corporate statute, which form of law is appropriate for what domain. I think that will go a long way to providing us with a more positive timeline for human beings, and not just for all capital persons whose birth certificates are on Wall Street. Am I making any sense?
Oh, yes, yes. And in fact, let's say all of these kind of negative timeline events or projected negative timeline events, like a World War III, like a catastrophe, those negative events which produce large-scale kills are, in fact, the function of the kills is to produce a large number of instantly available surplus souls for the soul market under the
traffic. But I don't think World War III is going to be allowed. I think I have this belief that the truth about being lied to, okay, we've been lied to. My God, we've been lied to by astronomy, geography, geology. We've been lied to about everything. Archaeology, anthropology, paleontology, history, law. We've been lied to and lied to and lied to. And the people are getting it. People are getting disgusted with being lied to. Just that, this whole controversy over, is there a spherical Earth or is there an Earth plane, a flat one? Do you have any idea what that's doing to people over on YouTube? It's an absolute scream that people who never questioned anything, like the first time I ran into it, your jaw drops on the floor and you say, what? What do you mean the Earth is flat? How can the Earth be flat? The Earth has never been flat. And I've been taught this since I was 2 years old. You can't tell me the Earth is flat. And people are going nuts over this. You can't tell me the Earth is flat. I won't. Because the cognitive dissonance is shaking the minds of the people, and they're getting it. You mean they lied about that too? They lied about the moonshot. They lied about the Mars. They lied about the shape of the ground I'm standing on too. Oh, and it's just absolutely wonderful to watch people getting shaken out of their acceptance and ease and belief system. Like, holy, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, you just brought up a whole number of topics that unfortunately are beyond the of this program, because we'd spend all of the time discussing those and getting into those, and I'm sure that people watching this would say, wait a minute,
what are you talking about?
And so we're going to put that on hold, okay?
Yes, but because the people's awareness that things are wrong and that we're not getting the straight story is shaken to a point now where I think Jade Helm isn't going to succeed in doing what the cabal wants it to do. It may do some things, but it's not going to. And the military is not as monolithic as the cabal would like it to be. Things are getting shaken apart, and I don't think we're going to have World War III. That's my prayer.
Oh, right. Now, moving forward, and I know that you and I may have a difference of vision, in the sense that the way I look at the timeline, the positive timeline equation by
it's
itself,
more abstract. Yeah, you're more abstract than I am.
Yeah. The positive timeline equation does not admit of large-scale catastrophe. That's a different video game that we were on prior to 2012, and we're on a different video game now. And so and, however, there are all these abuses like soul traffic, which in my view are a remnant of the Anunnaki rule and intervention.
Right.
And the
True.
Anunnaki rule and intervention were part and parcel of the Lucifer Rebellion, because the Lucifer Rebellion was a breakdown of law and order, and predatory races from other planets that had joined in the Lucifer Rebellion, like the Anunnaki, came here and just kind of, it was open season on souls.
Okay, but I'm aware of the Anunnaki personally. Okay.
Yeah.
And for one thing, they have been pretty much carved out of the picture in terms of the large mass of their souls, because of the ice wake that came with the new planetary cluster that we're in now. Okay. And they've lost their monarchy. Back in 2003, okay, the Wormwood cluster kind of loosely got around the Earth format, whatever it is, okay.
Right.
And from 2003 until 2011, they kind of consolidated physically so that the Van Allen belts also configured around the planet X, which is a dark matter mass that has settled into our atmosphere, which we look through and we figure that it's blue sky, but it's not sky. It's dark matter that's transparent. Okay, so that's in our sky. September 26, 2011, the comet, quote, Elenin, okay, got in between Earth and the old soul sun that we had, and peeled us out of that orbit so that we're no longer in the path going around that sun. That's why we have two suns in the sky now, and the little teeny tiny one is old soul that we've left way back there in this new solar cluster that we're in. We have a completely different confirmation now. Okay, and so we're on our whole planetary, this little cluster, is on its way to Orion Nebula, because the engineer who engineered this planetary cluster has some issues with Orion Nebula. And so what is happening in astronomy that can't be told is that there's somebody actually in charge of this whole planetary cluster. And how did the sun get switched? And how come the moon now is only a holographic image? It's not real anymore. And, you know, people who are looking at the sky are putting pictures up on Facebook all the time saying, I don't understand. This isn't what I knew. This isn't what I knew. But astronomers are not saying anything about it. Okay. So the Anunnaki are still living on their little planet Nibiru, which is a torus with a hole in it. And it's funny, the pictures of it only point to the hole and don't point to the donut. Okay, that's all right too. And they're following along at a safe distance behind our planetary cluster heading in. This fall, when you look up at the southwestern sky, you'll notice Orion's not there anymore, and that's because we have actually approached through some of the stars that make it look visible to us. You'll also notice that the Polaris, the North Pole star, is getting fainter and fainter and fainter and fainter and fainter because we're getting further away from it. We're escaping from this Milky Way galaxy, which is about to go into an implosion situation. Okay, and we're going to be okay. But a lot of the chemtrailing has to do with the Anunnaki engineering to keep this planet not only habitable for the humans on the surface, but also inhabitable for the dark matter beings in their matter format, which is in our atmosphere now. Okay, we also have Nemesis, their brown dwarf star, which is right over the Lick a solar observatory in San Jose, California every night, and every few days I do a new picture of Nemesis and show you how it's very plastic, and it changes its configuration and its coloring and its lights all the time. I put those up on Planetary Image Gallery. So the Anunnaki have learned that what they did in the past wasn't appropriate, that it doesn't work. But they are no longer in a position to dominate. The only functions they have left, considering that they've scattered and their planetary home is compromised, is that they're the engineers in our little planetary cluster now. That's all they have left to do. That's all that's here anymore. And they are still trying to market souls and humans because that's a form of commerce that they can profit from, that they need to keep themselves going. Like the Alpha Draconi have to have forms of commerce in order to keep themselves going. So what needs to happen is negotiations and conferences so that each race, whether you're Anunnaki or Gray or Tall White or Garthian or whoever you are, can negotiate for a place in this cluster until we get settled somewhere to the right. We got to take a right turn after, we're in a unique situation in one sense, that this, when it's said in the Bible, there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth, nobody thought it was going to be literal. Nobody thought we were going to go to a new sector of space and the earth was going to be reformatted. Never occurred to anybody. But because this is happening, and because of the chemtrail problem, Earth has changed some of its environments. Now, when I was flying back and forth to Norway, I was on a 787 at 40,000 feet, and I walked around the airplane, and I looked at the horizon going all the way 360 degrees around the airplane. It was perfectly flat. It was perfectly flat. Okay, that was point one. Point two, coming over Greenland. Mind you, this is the beginning, the first week in July. Coming over Greenland. Greenland is completely frozen. Greenland is massive ice, and there are holes, and then as you get over Hudson Bay coming into Canada, you have black and brown soil with ice chunks everywhere. This is July. So the planet climate is drastically different. And that's because some of the different interdimensionals and hyperdimensionals that we're going to have to be negotiating with require a different kind of situation than we do. And so when I was coming across the water between Greenland and Hudson Bay, off in the distance, I could see these very tall, what looked like transparent figures, interdimensionals like you'd see on a YouTube movie. And I was hearing myself, we have all kinds of animals on this ark, all kinds of human animals on this ark, and we're all headed out of the danger zone. And this is the new ark. We're on our way to Orion Nebula.
Right. It's quite a vision. Now, what is propping up then the old matrix of the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen of Holland, who are still doing their ritual child sacrifice, still going with the old...
Okay, Luciferianism is one faction of the Anunnaki. Satanism is another. Fundamentalism is another. The Anunnaki have the same factions that we have, so that we have to negotiate the methods, because the old communist saying, The end justifies the means.
Well, that sounds like a Jesuit saying.
Okay, but you see, the outcome of the end justifies the means is that everything gets wrecked, ruined, and spoiled because nobody's paying attention to their means or their methods. So coming together, perhaps at Brussels, perhaps in New York, we have to agree that the end does not justify the means that spoils the planet and kills the people. We have to negotiate with each other a set of win-win situations that allows for indigenous hominids, that allows for animals, that allows for everybody to have a place. And I think that's our future.
Now, let me again come with a contrarian point of view.
Okay.
We have, and I know that you and I have faced contrarian in different arenas in this.
And we will for a while.
Yeah, and we have Pope Bergoglio now, and I've read his 108-page encyclical, and he's coming to the U.S. He's going to speak in the U.S. Congress, first time ever. And then he's going to give the benediction in the UN for the post-2015 development agenda, which is, in a sense, the opening of world government. And I've spoken to ecologists that say, look, if you're going through these governmental forms like the UN and the Vatican, you are never going to be able to get true ecology. It's always going to be these forms that are in the end going to kill the planet. Because you're looking.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah, so how are we going to deconstruct the UN, the Vatican?
We have to break the back of the hierarchies and the laws that keep the hierarchies in place. It's the laws that keep those hierarchies in place.
And how is that going to happen?
Well, you keep praying your side and I'll keep praying mine. We'll see how it works out.
Now, what is your side and what is mine?
Well, you don't see any place for an organized society of people who all relate together to a single concept of interdimensional intelligence. You don't see a place for that as a church. And I do see a place for the church for a certain level, a certain assortment of humans who are not fully aware of options and possibilities. They're not as educated, they're not as aware as some other people, but they need a way of thinking to guide them through this time. Okay. Well, I wouldn't destroy the church. I would just make it mind.
Yeah. I mean, I could see right now, we know from the evidence, and I know that you dispute the evidence, that the Vatican and the Church of England are run by ritual child sacrificers.
I know that that's true, and they've got to be thrown out and prosecuted. And let the churches themselves left intact so they can continue to be ethical teachers at the level of ethical teaching. But by throwing out all the leaders, having no leaders at all is worse. Well, because the new generations are not taught how to lead. They haven't got a clue.
Well, but suppose that practically all of the personnel in the church are Satanists. What are you going to do?
Throw them all out and force the church to, as it says in Scripture, every 10 men choose a leader. Take the top 10 leaders and have them choose a leader. Take the top 10 and have them choose a leader. You have to have a chain of command. And so if you throw out all of the church leaders from the top to the bottom, it becomes the church's responsibility to emerge a whole new set of leaders. That's their work. That's their job.
So what you're calling for is a new messianic age.
I don't know what I'd call it.
No, I mean, that's the process that you're calling for, is
Okay.
a new messianic
Yes,
age.
because
Not,
the people who are ethical are connected to the awareness of the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah, and so by you going to the UK, you're putting yourself forth as a new leader of the Church of England.
Well, all right, I can do that.
Yeah.
Why not?
So speaking
If
of,
Moses could, I could. You know.
yeah, so speaking of which, you know, I happen to have gone on the site of Indiegogo yesterday, and it's real simple. I can send you the link. You just start a project there, and you say how much it's going to cost. You describe the project, and people can send you contributions.
Oh, I even have a name for it. I even have a name for it already.
Well, then, so suppose that, you know, tomorrow you put your Indiegogo crowdfunding project up there.
Yeah.
You're headed for Britain. You're the new Messianic Age contender for the British crown. You're the daughter of King Edward VIII, who was taken illegally off the throne because of a conspiracy between the Archbishop of Canterbury and the
Previous
white.
king.
Yeah. And you say, you know, this is going to be thorough. We're going to clean house. So
I can do that.
Yeah. So is that what you're going to do?
That sounds right to me. That really resonates because I've been thinking about the name for this new group. Now, we know that the Celts, all right, were operating from the Davidic covenant back from 583 BC to 400 AD. So that's the period in history. They had a form of law. What was the form of law? But they had their form of laws, which were very, very sophisticated. And so the Celtic Assembly is going to have something to do with restoring the original British Kingdom of David.
And what do you have to do with the Celts?
I am one. I am one because I straddle the two covenants. I straddle the Kingdom of David covenant of the Mosaic Law and Yahweh and the ancients going back to the Anunnaki. But I'm also, as a Christian, teaching the behavioral components of Jesus' teachings, which were excellent. You know, his teachings come to us from Lyra, and his teachings about behavior, let your know me know. Let's see, he who is faithful in what is least will also be faithful in much. Treat others the way you want to be treated. His behavioral teachings are straight out of the Lyran civilization, and they work beautifully long term, but they're kind of uncomfortable in the short term, and this is what needs to be taught. So yes.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you're going back to England to become
the new Archbishop of Canterbury.
Well, no. You're going back to become the new head of the Church of England, the new
head of the Church of England.
Yeah. And that's why Elizabeth Windsor, that's why Charles, that's why Prince William, if they were part of this, Prince Philip, that's why they kept you out of England.
Yes, because they don't want a resurgence, a renaissance in the Church of England.
Okay.
And that's what I'm there to do.
So it'll be about a week for this to get online. I'm willing to work with you
I love it.
To create an Indiegogo site. I'll send you all the links.
Okay.
You can create it. You can come up with the name. This is the new Messianic Age. Emphasis
the new
on
Messianic Age. Okay.
Emphasis on messy, right? No, that's just a joke. But get your Celtic queendom going, and
I can do that.
yeah, and renewal and chase those people out of there and get your father's heritage, who was a light being, back on the crown, and move it forward and hold a referendum and say, would you hold a referendum of the people of Britain and say, do you want a continuation or not?
Well, do you want a continuation of threats to convert the British Isles to Islam and its
Right.
medieval prohibitions against women and little girls and free
Yeah.
mind?
So it's clear that the current occupants are just trying to trash the whole thing, right?
Yeah, well, they want that world order to follow maritime law, keep them in control, and keep them profiting off of their covenants and businesses, and their
Yeah.
investments. They have to have the
Yeah.
interest on their investments, and that's exactly what needs to go bye-bye.
Okay. Now, one of the problems that you had in your last go around was that they shot your infrastructure, your places to stay out from under you. Do you want to put out the call now for people who support your concept
I
and
think
idea?
that will be part of this program, is to look for places that are safe havens for not just myself, but for other people who are offended by what has happened to the church and to our culture and to our law, that the Queen had vowed to protect, which she has not protected at all.
Right. Right.
Okay, so yes, we need places, safe haven, sanctuaries,
Yeah.
like in the first century there were the catacombs in which Christians found sanctuary. We need something like that because of the relentless pursuit of surveillance.
Right.
That's taking over. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you've given me something to work on here.
Okay. Okay. Good. Well, no, this is part of what you say you're doing. I mean, it's not just me. I'm just.
Well, I've just been mulling it over.
Yeah.
I haven't been the idea, well, just go do it.
Yeah.
Oh, I can do that.
Yeah. Sure. Now, there are a few kind of loose ends that are up here that I'd like to, uh, 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 ask you about and see if you can address. There's a whole issue of the Anunnaki gold caches, and I know I had the privilege of going to Adam's Calendar in South Africa and seeing the stone circles that go all the way up to Zimbabwe, and see there was a tremendous period starting 280,000 years ago where the Anunnaki came here during the Lucifer Rebellion.
Yeah.
And they exploited this planet for gold, for their own planet. But when they left, I mean, kind of in their bulk intervention, when they left here ruling hierarchies that became the Egyptian pharaohs, and they became the churches, and they became
the hierarchies,
and they became all the hierarchies and the monarchies. And among that, they left huge caches of surplus gold.
Well, it's a good thing, because we're going to need them, because the way that the planet has got to be cleaned up from all the pollution is that the ice wall has to be moved across the Pacific to cut off all that pollution, and extended toward the Atlantic, and 2 more stanchions. The land masses on the planet are held together by the 4 corners of the earth, and each of the corners, one is under South Africa, one is under South America, and so forth. And those stanchions are pillars that are coated with gold so they don't erode. And so 2 more of those stanchions are going to have to be built, and coated with gold so they don't erode either. So all that gold is going to be needed for construction of the new land masses for the earth plane.
Now, where did you derive this information from?
Yahweh.
I see.
The God of the Hebrews, who was the creator of the Anunnaki race, who was behind the genetic alteration of the human race and the Eden event and the bloodline, Adam and his bloodline going down to Noah, going down to Abraham, going down to Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and so on and so forth, which ends up in Cork County, Tara, Ireland in 583 BC. That's all Yahweh's covenant. And he's the one, the engineer, who originally settled this mud puddle that we actually, the earth plane is a mud puddle in the middle of a huge ice field at the center of a galaxy which is about to collapse. So the center of the mud puddle is our North Pole. And that's where the huge magnetic black hole is that everything else revolves around. So that has to get moved down to West Africa, and the ice wall has to get moved out into the Atlantic, and new land masses have to be formed and aggregated from meteors and stuff. And so we have a lot of construction to do. We'll need that gold.
Okay. Now, currently, that gold is claimed by the genetic descendant families of the Anunnaki that say that it was left in trust for them, and they're using it as commercial bankers and as backing for currency, and they're kind of sitting on it, or it's in hidden caches, and it's kind of gone underground because when the communist revolutions happened, with Mao Zedong, who was a Yale, he was a Skull and Bones asset, groomed by Yale and China Hospital, where he got his start as an intern at the Yale and China Hospital. It was really a Skull and Bones project, which is the second chapter of the Bavarian Illuminati.
Well, you think Yahweh can't retrieve his gold from a bunch of humans?
Well, right now, a lot of the Anunnaki gold is underground or in caches scattered in various.
And that's okay.
And
he can mine it and retrieve it.
There are these people that are kind of sitting on it, and so how are you and we going to mobilize it to get all these stanchions built and all that?
I'm going to let that be Yahweh's problem, because he's the one who has to construct the 2 new stanchions for the corners of the earth. I'm going to let that be his problem, and we'll be talking about it, and he'll inform me. Okay, this is a hyperdimensional situation that's been going on for 21 years, okay? And he and I have fought about everything, okay? We've been fighting for 21 years, so we're going to keep it, because I insist that if any God is going to inflict an ideology on any bunch of humans, it's got to work. It's got to work out for everybody.
Now, are you a manifestation of what they call the divine right of kings or queens?
No, you know what I am? I'm an old dragon. Oh, I see. And I just got sick and tired of the fighting and the killing. And I remember going like this and looking at these huge pads and these huge claws. And I remember screaming at Yahweh back then, I am sick and tired of wrecking and killing and maiming and ruining, and I want to do something more productive, more positive than this. And that's when I became a human at Lyra, and so on and so forth. And I'm remembering most of my lives here. And there's simple cause and effect at our level here in third density, and the fifth through eighth density space cases can dream up whatever they want to dream up. But we're down here on the ground, and I like it here.
Okay.
I don't want to go up there.
You don't want to go up there, and now you've incarnated as the daughter of King Edward VIII, and you're on a mission from God. Now,
I'm on a mission now. Yeah.
Okay. Let me continue with the questions. Now, here's a question. And our colleague, you may know her, Patricia Corey, and she and I have been in long conversations, and she's written a number of books on the area, and that is that Homo sapiens was originally actually created as 12-strand DNA, light beings in the third dimension by a consortium of upper dimensional humans. They're actually the Regional Galactic Governance Council that's in charge of us in this planet, and they are the Alpha Centaurians, the Pleiadians, the Sirians, and others who are a Regional Galactic Governance Council. And they created us as an experiment, being a 12-strand light being in the third dimension, created as sort of the guardians of the third dimension. It was a real experiment. Lo and behold, then, the Anunnaki, and this was about 500,000 years ago or more.
Right.
And Homo sapiens was developing on this planet, minding its own business. And lo and behold, in the middle of the Lucifer Rebellion, in violation of something called the law of non-intervention, in violation, that's the only reason why the Anunnaki are here, is that they chose to violate a cosmic...
That's not the only reason.
Okay, well, one is that they chose to violate the norm by coming here to get the gold, and for other reasons, because they said, the end justifies the means, we need the gold, we're going to come here, and they landed here in the middle of the Homo sapiens experiment on Earth by the Regional Galactic Governance Council that had developed Homo sapiens as a 12-strand DNA. Well, so they violated that norm. And not only that, they said, oh, these Homo sapiens, they're too inconvenient for our gold mining, so we're going to use sonic technology. We're going to take 10 of their strands, we're going to knock them up to their etheric bodies, known as their higher selves. So their human bodies, their avatars, are just going to walk around like 2 strands, and they're just going to be slaves, and they're not going to know what's going on. So boom, that's what they did. And that for the last 250,000 years, we've been essentially consciousness slaves. In contravention to the experiment here by the Galactic Governance Council.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. But you don't have
that is something that's a wrong that has to be righted.
But you don't know why.
No, hold on. No, let me finish my case. My case. You see, you are the counsel for the defense here. You're in the dock. You are the heir to the Anunnaki tradition, and I am the heir to the human tradition, along with 3.9 billion of my family, and you're in the dock, and I'm the prosecutor.
Okay.
Okay? And I'm saying, hey, you broke the law of non-intervention. You took away our cosmic heritage. You dumbed us down from 12-strand DNA to 2-strand DNA because you wanted to mine this planet, and we were inconvenient. So we've had 250,000 years of war, disease, crime, and poverty because you wanted it, and you wanted it your way, and you've been lording it over us, all that thing. Now, how are you going to make that up, and how are you going to get us back up? What's your answer?
Okay. The answer is this. The answer is Lyra. Lyra was a wonderful culture and civilization, cooperative, rational, reasonable, And the Alfred Draconi came down and cleaned their clock because they had no clue. They had never experienced deceit and treachery and trickery and debauchery. They had never experienced any of it. Now, the Lyran people came here, and they're mostly in Northern Europe, okay? And they put hedges around themselves, okay? But in order for us to be able to handle the predatory and parasitic, the predatory races are the Alfred Draconi, who merely need sources of food at the physical level, and the Archons, who need sources of food at the subjective level. But we also have to deal with the parasitic ideologies coming from great distance, the transhumanist movement, the equivalent of the Borg. We have to be able to handle those technologies and those way of thinking. And so this, as the center of the nest of humanity, had to take on the teaching of how to master over deceit. And that's why the Anunnaki, who are deceitful as hell, greedy as all get out, they're the worst of the worst, were brought here to teach the people of Lyra and the human souls the skills they would need in order to deal with the rest of the universe and the predators and the parasites and the commercialists and the globalists and all of those others ideologies. So yes, it was terrible that what was going on here was nice and rational and decent, and it was interrupted, and it was overruled by so much cruelty. Yes, that's all correct. But now, humanity has processes in place that know how to confront deceit, that know how to negotiate zero-sum conflicts, that we can now confront the Anunnaki, our own progenitors, the Alpha Draconi, who need food and they eat us, you know. We can now confront deceit, which we couldn't do. And that's the reason for the whole thing. So now that we have the techniques and the skills to confront and disarm deceit, we have to put them to work and resolve the whole mess and forgive the whole mess and start over.
Well, that's a very long-range point of view. I would say that I would feel much more confident, as personally, this is just my personal opinion, having a person like you in the British throne than a person like Elizabeth Windsor in the British throne.
She's clueless.
I mean, clueless is very kind. Look at some of the evidence of what she's engaged in and what the people that she partners with.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what we have to do, is put all these skills to work now. And that's what this funding site is going to have to do, is sort who's got what skills and which skills are you willing to put to work for the new Church of England.
Good. Good. Great.
Was that a good answer?
Well, I think that this is a dynamic exchange, you know, and which means that you ask questions that you don't know the answer to, and the answer comes back more than you expected. So that's all good.
We always have it this way. I always learn so much from you because
likewise.
And I have to go, wait a minute.
That's good.
I love it.
We've actually covered all the territory. We've come to sort of the end of our segment today. Is there something that you wanted to raise that we have not covered yet?
Something that I wanted to raise, I think you brought it up when you said I have to do the funding site, because having had my horse knocked out from under me, I really have been kind of like, oh, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Okay, that helps a great deal. And so in the next day or so, I'm going to go give that a great deal of thought and
Okay.
pull that together. And then your feedback, when I get it together, I'll put
Yeah.
together a whole web page and stuff. Your feedback would be greatly appreciated, and that's
Great.
what has to happen.
Okay, good. Right after we finish this interview, I'm going to send you the links to the Indiegogo, and it's very simple. It says, this is how you build it, and you click here, and it just leads you through the whole process.
Okay, I can do that.
Good. And what we'll do is we'll time this so that by the time this interview is published in about a week or so,
It'll be
that'll all be ready so that people in the UK and beyond, because
English-speaking people everywhere are all over the world.
English speaking, if you look at the Commonwealth, it's way beyond English speaking. And people who want to transform, the one place you want to transform is the British monarchy. That's like a crucial sort of a lynchpin.
Well, that's the crux of the problem.
Yeah.
That's where it all starts.
From the Anunnaki to the British monarchy.
To the city of London, Inns of Court, Temple Bar, that's where it is.
Yeah. So that's our focus. To the Church of England, that whole thing.
The Church of England has to advise Temple Bar on ethics.
Yeah.
And that hasn't been happening for a long time. Also the Privy Council. The Privy Council used to be empowered with their wisdom to bring it to the monarch and to negotiate conflicts of interest. The Privy Council now is just purely ceremonial. They just, walk around in their fancy robes.
Because they're all secret Satanists and ritual child sacrificers, and that's why they make the policy as they're killing the children.
And they have to be prosecuted under common law for killing those children.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm absolutely for it.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we therefore have covered everything.
And we've done our work.
Now, right now, if people want to get hold of you and be in communication with you and find out more, how can they do that?
Okay, at Facebook, of course, I'm under Emily Elizabeth Windsor Cragg, and that's the page that has some room for friends. The Maureen Cragg page doesn't have room.
I have to say this, and people advise me. Many people, I've been told this by some media, some people are prohibited by the terms of their work from going to Facebook while they're at work.
What about LinkedIn?
So
LinkedIn is a working site.
Yeah, so you can go to LinkedIn.
Yeah, okay, and I've got a big profile there.
What's an email that people can reach you? Things like that.
EMICRA, the number 8 at AOL.
That's EMICRA 8
at AOL.com. That's my commercial. I use it for everything. Email address. You can always reach me. That's always paid up, and it's always the one to find.
Yeah.
And I have another one at Gmail and so on. I've got others that are invested in, free ones, but like the commercial one because it's the safest.
Yeah. And also your books that are at Amazon under your name, Emily Windsor Cragg, correct?
Right, that's right. And there are 18 books there, some of them on crochet and some on children's textbooks. And, they cover a whole gamut because I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. That's what I do, is I get people to think about new things. So that's what we'll do.
Good.
That's what we'll do.
So please leave us, the viewers and the people of Britain and the people of the world and everybody watching this with some final thoughts? Would you
Well,
like?
yes. What I'd like to leave is that, yes, Alfred, there is a positive timeline, and it was given to us at Genesis 3:15, and it was given to us again with each succeeding covenant. There was the covenant of stewardship that failed, and then survival, and then literacy, and mobility, and then the law, and then the covenant of intention rather than just following the steps of the law. That whole history in Scripture is just a tiny summary of the picture of the engineer guy who put this earthly plane together in the beginning and is working on it now to help clean up the mess. He has a vision, and he's just as real to me as you are. He has a vision of the planet in which reason prevails and justice prevails and truth prevails. And now we need to move into that way of thinking, because we've had a lot of deceit and corruption that needs to get moved off, needs to get fixed and repaired and restored. And humans need to have a way to achieve and retain a measure of spiritual and cosmic respect, which humans have not had for a 250,000 years. It happens every time. Every time. How do I get this thing to go away? There we go.
I know.
Every single time.
Like,
okay.
Next time, I'm going to ask you to disconnect your phones if that's possible.
First, okay. We have the opportunity to fulfill the engineer, creator, Yahweh's vision. We can do it. And now that he's older now, and he's gained a lot of wisdom too, we're going to need to help him a little bit. And I think we can. So we'll do that.
Very good. And needless to say, I want to thank you for your tireless work. You are a person who learned of your mission later in life, and you've taken it on selflessly and fearlessly and with determination and courage. And we want to thank you for taking time out to be with us today. And we look forward to your joining us in the future as events develop. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Emily.
Thank you, Alfred. I appreciate it very much.
Certainly. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.